Let me just say right out the gate, this video has nothing to do with Taylor Swift. Hi! It's currently winter in the Southern Hemisphere. Unfortunately, it's not socially acceptable to go out like this. Also, this has no armholes. Just to be clear, I'm gonna call this a doona during this video. I know that to you it might be a duvet or possibly a comforter, but to me, this is a doona. We could say bedspread, that's probably safest, but I will just say doona. I'm getting distracted. This one has sleeves, so it's better, but it still screams pajamas, so not really appropriate for wearing out. Plus, I knock stuff over in it all the time. It's real wide. So this week, I want to take the best parts of both of these and combine them into a giant wearable blanket. Okay, I have ruined my hair with all of these costume changes. Let's just collectively ignore the little like pigeon spike that's happening there. I'm gonna make it out of a doona cover that I picked up recently on an op shopping trip. I found this double doona and pillowcase set for $7, 100% linen. So it's gonna really feel like a blanket. For the filling, we have, I haven't told you about the design yet. Sorry, I'm still not quite with it. It's design, then materials. Here is my design. I am going to make a hooded, really long, oversized puffer jacket. And I also want to make a snap-on scarf out of the same materials so that we have this big voluminous thing I can put around me as well. We're going to insulate it with this giant thing of wool batting that I got last winter. I got it from Wool Valley. It's 100% wool and it works out cheaper than buying polyfill. I couldn't visualize what 5 meters was.
Oh gosh.
I might double layer it. I purchased this pattern yesterday from Grasa, so I'm gonna need to extend it to make the coat. I also, and I may regret this, bought this 3 sizes too big. That was possibly a mistake. We'll find out soon. If I missed anything in this intro, I'm gonna get editing me to sort it out because I'm gonna be honest. I printed the pattern in A4 and started taping it together the day before because I was just too tired from my last video to film the intro. I didn't want to print this on A4. You can also print it on a plotter printer, which is 3 feet wide, but I literally couldn't find a print shop near me that knew what a plotter was, which feels weird. While we're on the topic of patterns, let me know in the comments who your favorite indie pattern makers are. Grasa is my go-to because they're high quality and they have photos of the steps, but the translated instructions can be a bit confusing. Etsy is plagued with AI patterns now apparently, so let me know where else I should be looking. I'm just realizing how big these armholes are. This is my hand. It's definitely going to be oversized. Maybe 3 sizes too big is a mistake. Or maybe it's bigger to accommodate for all the fluff that goes in it, hopefully. Judging by the changes in light, I think that taping this together and cutting it all out took 2 full days. All right, we got our pattern pieces, we've got our lining pieces, we've got our fabric all ironed and ready to go. And I forgot that I need to alter the pattern pieces, so let's do that. Oh, Bunny, careful. You're right. Okay, we'll go get you a treasure. The first alteration was to the length to take this from a jacket to a coat, although I will use those words interchangeably because reasons. Oh no, that's the end of my paper roll. On the plus side, that paper has 1-inch squares and my rulers are all in centimeters. So this is an opportunity to get some pattern making paper that is for Australia. Although I'm not gonna do that. I have a massive roll of just brown craft paper. I'll just use that for now. I also added some width to the center front because you better believe I'm not doing a zipper on this. I just wanted to make sure there was an overlap. Initially I planned to do it up with snaps, but you'll see. I've done all of the pattern modifications now. I'm keeping it really minimal for this because in a very uncharacteristic move for me, I'm not doing a mock-up. In order to do a mock-up, I would need to use a cheap fabric and still use the insulation, there's hair in my mouth. The mock-up is pointless without having the insulation in it. Like I'm just not gonna get an idea of the fit. I'm already using very cheap fabric and I'm just gonna go for it. Yeah, so I'm gonna cut out all the pieces that I need to do in the main fabric, and for the lining, I'm just gonna scrounge around for some sheets that I've got stored away, hopefully. Let's get to it. Can we somehow get a poll going in the comments? Do you pin the pattern and cut, or do you trace the pattern onto the fabric, remove the pattern, and then cut? My go-to is always pinning, and I feel like it's less accurate because the paper shifts, but on a fabric like linen that shifts so much, tracing is gonna be a bad time too. No matter how long I have been sewing, this patterning process still does my head in. I scrunched up these pieces because I didn't think I needed the facings because I was gonna make my own, and then I forgot to make the facings before I started cutting out all of the fabric. So now we have to also make facings. Here's Alfie doing the classic, that looks like a nice place to sit. Here's me trying to explain that I need to cut out my pattern pieces to no avail. Alfie not giving a single hoot, and eventually leaving when I stop patting to look for something. We've had a little whoops. I forgot about the scarf. This is about how much fabric we have left. We've got part of a pillowcase and then scraps. And we still need to cut out the facings, the pattern pieces for which I have not made yet. But hopefully they are not too big, and I feel like for facings, I can kind of just Frankenstein them together. Why did I cut out the lining of the hood in the linen before I had cut out all the other pieces. So I think I'm gonna have to use most of this to make our scarf. I'm just gonna eyeball it. That's a bad idea. You know, I'll use a ruler or something, but yeah, I don't have a pattern piece for it, but let's just estimate. That is some solid estimating right there. Oh look, I did use a ruler. Also, that is some prime shrimping. After cutting out the scarf pieces, I marked the quilting lines, another point in favour of drawing on the fabric before cutting. I feel like that would have been easier. Next, I made the facing pieces, chose another doona cover for the lining, and realised it was way too crinkled and needed an iron. Oh, whoops. I must have had the steam up too high because, yikes. It's time to cut this one out. I really would love to double layer it, I think, because even though it's super puff, I don't think it's as puffy as I would like to make it feel like a doona. Amazing news. I'm just realizing that this is already double layered. It's been folded in half before it's been rolled up. That's helpful. You are less helpful. Can I roll this out, please? How does it already have my hair on it? This doesn't feel like it's gonna be enough. We're gonna make it fit. Because yeah, look, that's about how thick it is normal. I like it with the 2 layers, I think. I think we wanna make it real thick. Wish me luck. That sounded really serious. Wish me luck. The instructions said to cut an extra 3 centimeters around the insulation pieces. I'm guessing because of its tendency to shift during sewing. I couldn't just do something right the first time, could I? That's the back, which I cut out as 2 individual pieces. That is the front, and I cut it on the fold. The most expensive material that we are working with, the one that is hardest to replace. Of course I cut them wrong. At this stage I was still tossing up whether to double layer it or not. I'm quite indecisive if you haven't noticed, but it didn't feel fluffy enough with only one, so I proceeded to cut out double of everything, only to find that I had to Frankenstein the hood pieces together with scraps. Oh wow, I'm covered in fluff. This is all the insulation that's going in the coat. It's pretty heavy. Why do I keep making projects that end up really heavy? I think that means tomorrow we can start on construction. I have realized that if I have so many layers of wool that I may not be able to put snaps through this. So we may end up having to make some ties or something to close this. We'll figure it out. All right, I will see you tomorrow. Bye. Did that work as a transition? I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Yeah, that worked. So I forgot about the scarf again. So we're just gonna have to stuff it with all of the scraps that are left from the wool batting. So I don't know how to organize this project. There is just mess everywhere. So I think what I'm gonna start with is just attach all of the insulation layers to the outer layers. I hope the presser foot can get high enough to go through the 2 layers of insulation. I didn't think of it until literally just now. Let's get going. I wasn't quite sure how to hold these together. The pegs didn't last and the pins tended to fall out. And then I got to sewing the quilting lines. Unfortunately, the thread broke almost immediately. And then again, and again, and again. Okay, I have fiddled with these tension settings. I've done everything. So I'm thinking I might need to go and get a heavy duty thread because it's just tearing. I struggled to figure out which of these 2 was stronger, but the Mini King was more expensive and had a color that matched pretty well, so I went with that one. I also grabbed an extra strong upholstery thread in white just in case. They didn't have pink for that one. Then I sewed really slowly and tried not to put too much tension on the fabric. Success! I hate buying polyester. I hate that I need to do that for this machine. It seems that the Gutermann thread is pulling through. No breakages so far. All right, let's actually start to smash this out now that I'm not going to be sewing in 2 centimeter increments. I don't know if you can tell, but this is where I really started to get concerned with the construction. There's just so much fabric here. Pretty soon the coat started to fight with my pegboard. I tried moving the bits and bobs out of the way, but we were firmly in struggle town. I needed way more room. When stitching quilting, you sew from the inside out and then all around. But if you look at my incredibly accurate illustration of my sewing machine, this is how much room we have for me to shove all of that coat through. Oh, this was filmed on my time-lapse camera, so I did this really slowly to make it seem like real time. But yeah, this setup was way better. Okay, so the thread only broke when the weight of the fabric fell down and it was, I guess, pulling too much against it. So that's good to know, we're learning. Okay, so if I can support it more, maybe it won't do that. There's still the issue of shoving all of that fabric through that small spot on the machine though. So all of this shoving it through the machine has kind of torn up the insulation layer a little bit, but at least the back panel is done now. I landed on using safety pins to hold everything in place. While linen feels amazing for this project, it's not the easiest to sew with when insulation is involved. So I got to work sewing the quilting lines on this front panel and it was going pretty well. Until this moment right here when I got my finger caught between the needle and the presser foot. This was also filmed in time lapse. Whew, gonna calm myself down. Industrial sewing machines are not to be fucked with. The needle just went through my finger. I got my finger stuck between the foot and the needle, and I was using my leg to lift the foot to try and get it out, but that was crushing it more into the needle. That didn't feel good. I don't know what to do now, because I've never actually had a hole in my nail like that. Thomas! I put a band-aid on it and kept my finger out of the way. It was honestly fine. I didn't even hit the bone. All of the insulation has now been attached to the outer fabric. All it cost me was a finger and like 2 days of sewing. Now that the quilting is done, it just gets harder from here because now I have to join these pieces and try and sandwich them under the machine, and I don't think it's gonna want to do that. First step, we have to trim off all of the excess, which sucks but is good because it means we're gonna have even more to fit into the scarf. So right after I've stabbed my finger with a needle, and I'm sorry, that's probably a trigger for some of you, now seems like a good time to ask you to like and subscribe. Thanks! There she is. My beautiful coat in pieces. Here is our new pile for the scarf, so I am no longer worried. And here is all of the fluff that won't come off my legs. I'm so itchy and also hungry. I'm gonna go start dinner, and I will see you tomorrow for, I guess, actual construction starting. I hope. I think I've done all the prep stuff now. Okay, bye. I know I already signed off, but I needed to know if the machine would be able to sew through the seams before I went to bed. Look at how cute it is! Ah! I feel like a squishy spaceman. I'm gonna put my hat on. My hair is a mess today. So the most important thing I have found is making sure that the edges of the fabric are folding outwards, which is really difficult. The edge of the fabric really wants to fold inwards, and then that gets caught in the seam. So the other thing was that initially I did plan to do the welt pockets. I've cut out the welts and those pocket pieces, and I have realized with how difficult it is just to sew a seam on this. Like, I'm just not gonna be able to make a welt pocket work. It's just not gonna happen. It's too thick. There's too much insulation. I am just gonna do some side seam pockets, so I figure we could get started. I'm sure I've got a pattern piece somewhere for some side seam pockets, so let's do that. Okay, so I found a couple of side seam pockets, but I actually don't like any of these, so I'm gonna make a new one. Well, the sun went away. I interfaced the pockets to give them a bit more strength because this is a light to mid-weight linen. And then because I was already here, I also interfaced some of the facing pieces. For the record, welt pockets would have been much comfier. It's a more natural spot to rest your hand, but they have to be so precise and it just wasn't gonna happen with this insulation. All right, we have our pockets individually attached. We have our ever-present pile of scraps. Time to sew the shoulder seams and then attach the sleeves. Whew. She has reached beast mode. Beast? Beast. Beast mode. Nope, never mind. Hi, Alfred. Yeah, this thing is getting increasingly difficult to wrangle. Okay. All right, so we have our sleeves sort of attached. Man, this is difficult. All right, so the next step will be to stitch all along the sleeves, the pocket, and down the sides in one fell swoop. Or as close as to one fell swoop as is possible with this incredibly difficult to wrangle coat. So I have figured out how to stitch the seams now, and what I am doing is stitch both of the ends in place and then the middle section, so for the arm, like one edge, and then the center, and then stitch through. I just have to, every couple of millimeters, pull the fabric out so that I am not stitching it curled under. I don't know what happened. Suddenly it was nighttime and I was wearing the hood as a hat. And now comes the part where I'm going to emphasize just how difficult this was to sew. My back actually hurts, like a fair bit. All the weight and mass of this thing made it so tricky to balance, and the more weight there was, the more likely the thread was to break. I had to stitch really slowly, holding the edges of the fabric out so it wouldn't fold in and get caught in the seam. And often the batting got caught in the foot and had to be cut out. I'm gonna say it. I don't care that you broke your elbow. No, 2 layers of insulation is too many. I mean, it definitely has the quality of a blanket. So we're on track that way, I guess. Oh no, the fluff. It's everywhere. Oh, right. So I have organized the space somewhat. We are ready to do the lining of the hood, and then I have a cuff situation to work out, and then all of the lining and facing pieces need to be attached and then somehow attached to the jacket. I picked up this fabric and I bought so much of it for literally just doing 2 cuffs. And we're gonna get into the most complicated cuff I have ever seen. So if we look at the jacket pattern, the cuff is on the inside of the coat. So we've got the outer, and then the cuff has to attach to a facing and a lining, and this gathering with additional facing pieces is a lot. But I think I know how to do it, ish. So let's get to it. This is our inside cuff facing. These are gonna get gathered onto our elastic cuff. I'm not doing that yet though. I gotta sew them together, hang on. Okay, now they're ready, but I realized gathered is the wrong word. So we're not gonna gather it, we're going to stretch it into the facing, okay? Does that make sense? I'll just do it. This is one of those situations where I still can't verbally explain it, so let's just look at the videos and listen to the music, yeah? Okay, so we have our little cuffs here, and so this part here will get sewn to this part here. This gets closed over. This part here gets attached to the outer cuff of the coat, and this part, with this part sewn in between, gets attached to the sleeve lining. Does that make sense? I'm hoping it makes sense. So we'll continue with the cuffs, and before we attach it into the coat, we're gonna just sew all of the lining pieces together that I can. Thanks, Alfie. You're being a helper. So we gotta go for a walk before I can do the next one. Just realized I did the sleeves in the wrong order, so this is gonna be annoying. Actually, the arms weren't that hard to do. I just unpicked a little bit here and then stitched it. It was fine, but it has gotten dark. This was actually the next morning, but it was super dark because I forgot to open the blinds. I got started with attaching the facings to the cuff and the hem of the coat. Okay, so we have the facing on the cuff and I've top stitched that. I have the facing on the bottom, but I haven't top stitched that because I realized that the facing for the side, it's not gonna make sense, but the facing for the lining has to go here, and this is now too long, this blue section. So I feel like the construction is reaching a little bit of a free-for-all where I'm just gonna try my best to get everything attached, and it's probably not gonna make much sense. So I don't know, let's attach the hood. This is just gonna be a terrible transition. Actually, that wasn't bad. Well, that was incredibly annoying. I am so glad I wasn't filming that because that was so frustrating. Oh my God, the thread broke so many times. All right, let's get the lining in somehow. First, I attach the hood lining to the rest of the lining. Then I attach the cuff facing to the cuff. I was feeling a bit skeptical about it. Next was fixing that lining facing issue with the hem. I had just made the lining piece too long when I extended the pattern. Also, if you can't tell, I was getting really fed up with hauling this thing onto the machine and struggling against its not insignificant weight. With the facing/lining issue fixed, I was able to edge stitch the facing at the hem. Then it was the mammoth task of attaching the whole outer of the coat to the lining. Look at this nonsense. So I spent the afternoon sewing it all in sections so it didn't shift too much and listening to/watching Ghosts again. I finished Ghosts while I was taping the pattern, and now I was back around to season 2 again. Okay, so I must have been so excited for my date with Thomas because I packed up, turned off the lights, and just moved my camera and left. Like, left the house. It was running for 45 minutes until the battery died. Hello. He was a little excited. Watch his reaction when I say ow. Good boy. Oh, gentle. Ow. You're okay. You're okay. It was finally time to trim all the corners and the curves. All right, we got a lot of ironing to do. The lining just wants to poke out of the hood and everything. Even ironing this thing is hard. I had to use my chair to prop it up so it wouldn't tip the ironing board over. Oh, the amount of times that I've stabbed Taylor Swift in the eye with this thing. It's just her face is exactly where the mic goes. Good morning. So here's where I'm at. I need to secure the lining into the arm, into this little fancy cuff thing so that that actually is inside the coat. I need to secure the whole hang on. The whole bottom of the lining needs to be closed up as well. So, very excitingly, that means I'm done trying to wrangle this into the sewing machine. It's so heavy and ridiculous. So, it's hand sewing day. I'm so excited. Also, the second that this scarf is done, I am vacuuming this room. I ironed the lining edge, which made this a whole lot easier. It was a little tricky getting in there with the whip stitch because the cuff really didn't seem to want me to, but all in all, very relaxing. This is always my favorite part. The lining is in. I will say, not my best work. I find jacket and coat linings pretty tricky in general, except for that one tailored one that I did. But on something like this, when they're insulated, it just starts to go off, and I'm beginning to think that it is because the insulation makes the outer piece smaller, and so our lining ends up too big is what I think has happened. So we had to put some tucks in. We've done our best. Moving on, I have pinned the spots on here where I want the ties to go, so now we can get started on some closures. Let's do that. The state of this floor, oh my God. Scraps. Let's go. I think I actually used a ruler for these for once, and wouldn't you know, they actually turned out pretty uniform in shape. Quite happy with them. Oh, it is the last day that I have to wear these godforsaken clothes that are covered in fluff and are so itchy, but I just didn't want to get any of my other like outer layers covered in wool, so here we are. The coat is finished. The bows that's not correct. The bows are so cute. I'm really happy with them. They make it look a little bit more like it's a duvet, doona, comforter, whatever. And now it's time to make the scarf. I'm really excited to have the scarf because I feel like it's gonna work like a pillow. I will be just ready to go like in a sleeping bag all the time while wearing this. So I have 3 panels that are about yay long. So if it hung like this to here, but we have another half. So I'm gonna take the third one and fold it in half. So then we'll end up with a nicer length. Does that make sense? It doesn't even matter. I'll just show you. Let's get started. All right, so that is what we're working with. We're gonna take that top one, fold it in half. So these 2 together and then add that one on the end. Cool? Cool. Okay, this was a silly transition, but they're all sewn together now. See? I know I don't need to show all the ironing, but ironing linen is so satisfying. Also, this is really satisfying when it's sped up. Feels really weird for some reason. Maybe it's the color. It looks kind of worm-like, right? I initially wanted to dye this fabric when I bought it. I used all of the dye that I had bought that would have worked on the linen on Thomas's jeans, and realized that the pot that I have for dyeing is not big enough. And it was a lost cause. So like, even though it feels a little too close to my skin color to be flattering, it's too late. Nothing we can do about it. Next was marking the quilting lines and apparently having a real good time stuffing this worm scarf. I basically just shredded the scraps so they wouldn't be so bumpy and continued my binge of Lindsay Ellis and Princess Weeks. Thanks to Lindsay Ellis, I feel like I know so much about the Phantom of the Opera even though I've never seen it. I didn't even know what it was about before. I'm like half tempted to sew a little face on it and just make it a worm. It doesn't go with the rest of the look, but maybe at some point. The scarf is finished. To be real, I just tried it on with the coat. There isn't really enough room for a scarf, but I'm glad I made it. It's good stuff. Okay, I will see you for the reveal. Bye! Okay, but just before we get into the reveal, let's enjoy some really satisfying vacuuming footage. Okay, now we can go. Yeah, it doesn't snow here. Oh my god, it is too warm for this. Can I have a snack? Aww. Welcome to winter in Melbourne. Wrap up time. Yeah, this is like a doona. It's incredibly warm. It does block the wind, which I was worried about with the outer being linen, but toasty. This is fantastic. The way that I made this one, it turned out a bit softer and squishier, and I kind of wish that the whole jacket was like this. So lesson learned for if I do a puffer jacket again, rather than just sew the insulation in, I would do a second layer and like make a border, stuff it with scraps of wool or like wool, like fluffy bits. I can't remember what they're called right now. Because this is just like, it's a little stiff. It's quite a lot. Other than that, I'm really happy with it. It's really cozy. Like, I'm just wearing a tank top under this. It is way too warm to wear anything else. I really love how the ties look. All in all, happy with that. I feel like I am one with the blanket. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you next time for God knows what. Bye!